Hello, everybody. Welcome to Onion Soup, the show where we pull back the layers of metaphysics and reality in order to demystify spirituality. Today, I'm really excited to talk to Dr. Paul Sambataro. How are you doing today?
I'm great, and I look forward to our discussion today, and I hope it's of value to your audience. Thank you so much.
I hope so as well. I mean, your PhD is in neurobehavioral psychology, and your organization created something called the Emotional Budgeting Program. What is that all about?
Yes, and not to be confused with, and I've seen quite a bit up online, of course, to be confused with dispensing emotions or partialing out, a certain amount of emotions over a day. This is actually just gets to the very bottom foundation of everything in our biology and in our behaviors.
Mm,
And the bottom of that is addressing the emotions. We think of when we say we have feelings and emotions, we just kind of accept that as per events. But really, events are facts. And we really get to the bottom by identifying the facts behind the emotions. And actually, emotions are more related to relationships.
mm,
So it's kind of tough to have an emotion with a wall. When we want to go somewhere and get away from something, we actually calm down. But it's not because we're in four walls or if there's no noise, no input. So it's not more of a thing. It's more of a relationships. And so we go through relationships and facts of those to get to the root of behind the emotions. And then what happens is it goes to it's organized into memory. So when it's organized into memory, it's organized in recall. If it's not organized, it does get organized, but not in the way we expect. So
mm,
we're better off making files, creating more of a structure around memory of those emotions. So when it's recalled, they come out more structured and they come out more useful. So we increase all our cognitive function, problem solving, and when we do this, this is feedback to our brain reducing anxiety. So
mm.
anxiety has a lot to do with disorganization, uh, struggle, brain struggling to problem solve and so forth.
Interesting. Can you give us a example of what you mean? Like maybe, for instance, one of the traumas that I had, it took me a very long time to get over, was the feeling of, or rather, the lack of feeling love. So it took me a long time to get over that. And what I realized is that it wasn't that I wasn't loved by like my family and friends, because they did love me growing up. But for whatever reason, I had a disconnect in feeling that. And it wasn't until relatively recently that I recognized that it was a lack of love for self and so on and so forth. And that's why. So if we look at that as an example, how can we take that as a root cause to where that would be causing the anxiety and depression?
Okay, that's really interesting. And I have a whole year of tutorial and progressing through that with you. But I'm going to try and give it a quick elevator 30-second response, which is really nothing at all. But here's the issue to keep in mind. And the most important thing about all of what we're doing today, or for me, my emphasis is awareness.
Mm,
You can't really solve anything if you're not aware. It's sort of, you look at your dog and he goes, okay, I hurt and stuff, but he's, I'm assuming, not really aware of a lot of surroundings and impacts. And that's the same for us. So awareness is key to having choices. It's also key from there to making decisions. And then from decisions, we have responsibilities because we have awareness. If we do not have awareness, there's a lot of finger pointing, there's a lot of assumptions going on. And so variables are so important. And we don't know a lot of them in the brain. So here's a couple that I would like to take away to the audience. Our brains are continuously evolving and divergent in a sort of what I would call a curve, a population curve or a biology curve. And that's where the outliers are more extreme and everyone kind of fits in the environmental middle. Our
Mm,
brains are diverging. So our sensitivities differ from people to person, literally, even in the same family, because of genetic variation.
mm,
And it's really important to keep in mind that our siblings or our dad or our mom may have different sensitivities. So what you think you're very sensitive to, they may not. And
mm,
already we started that creates apples and oranges because we're assuming within a family that we're actually all on the same page. That's not
mhm,
necessarily true. There can be wide differences in sensitivities. That means if you're hurt, your feelings are hurt more than your brother or your mom or your dad, or maybe your concerns are more different from your mother, your brother, or your dad. It may not have anything to do with intention,
mhm,
but really literal sensitivities, vulnerabilities, and how a person thinks. So that's one very large variable that one person should keep in mind so that we don't grow
mhm,
paranoid, feel that we're outside the family, and so forth. So we have these vulnerabilities, and they diverge into very specific on the outliers issues. So I'm going to give two issues just as outliers, not because we all are, but as a sense of divergence.
mm,
One is autism and one is bipolar.
yeah,
So these are outliers. They're when people have trouble functioning. But a lot of people share similar symptoms that are day to day normal symptoms. They're not problems, but they
mhm,
do become problems in people who have sensitivities or vulnerabilities in those areas. So this is just a quick relay on those. So that's very important because when we're looking at different subtypes of how we react, we have internalization and we have overreaction or
mhm,
a kind of immediate reaction versus a delayed reaction. These are all super important, especially when it comes to behavior, because it does mean a difference in behavior. It doesn't mean necessarily it's not different in outcome eventually, but in how we make assumptions.
mm,
And this is just tip of the iceberg on variability, but if we keep that in mind, it adds to our awareness
mm,
and a lowering of the anxiety and a more of a searching for uh, can we be on apples and on the same page with each other? And that's what emotional budgeting really helps with because we can look at the facts and then we see how we respond differently and how our perspective is different
mm,
from each other. And we can get on the same page because even though the facts are there and they are facts, the perspectives are different or the sensitivities are different. And then, but we can get on the same page, especially between adults and children.
mm,
We have that tendency to we make assumptions as adults or we just ignore them because we know what the kids have to do. The kids don't understand this and they're like, I have pain of some sort, whether it's mental health or physical, and they don't know how to describe that as pain. And then we get the assumptions and then we get the lashing out and then we get the behaviors,
yeah.
the ones that we don't like. So I will just end right there and wait for another question. But I could keep going on all day in that kind of idea.
For sure. Let's start with adults before we go dive into children. So when we look at adults who have not necessarily neurodivergent issues, but are dealing with anxiety and maybe mild forms of bipolarism, how do you start to increase your own awareness of what might be causing that from the root?
Okay, so again, please, your audience, don't misunderstand me. When we talk about labels, and I did bring it up, it's going to be my fault. Bipolar and autism. For me, those are just the outliers of symptoms that people struggle that impact their function, their daily function. But we all experience a form of both or some or other that actually we go through every day, but we manage them successfully, or they're not as painful as those who may have a severe issue with depression or a severe issue with anxiety.
Mhm,
These are set up because of the way the brain is uh, growing, and it's just that's a whole nother conversation. But it's the way the brain is diverging as it evolves, and it's subtle, obviously. And what I go back to, what our program goes back to, is what is all the same. So what is all the same is our brain is an organ, and it has to keep us alive. That's what it's driving to keep us alive. And so even when we think about the dangers of suicide and all that that kids or adults are going towards, the irony is our brain really wants to keep us alive no matter what. So it's our organ. It's just like a heart. A heart does not want to give up. It'll give up
Mhm.
when it has disease or it can't or there's an issue or something. Then it's the same with the brain. The brain is driven, evolved biology to keep us alive. It wants under every circumstance. So our pain is our awareness of what is going on or lack of it. So
Mhm.
we are assuming what that pain comes from. We make assumptions. And unfortunately, we have gauges. Their eyes, nose, ears, taste, touch. Those are our gauges like a car, the oil gauge, the speedometer. That's what we are sensing. That's what we
Mhm.
put out. We do not have a gauge for neurotransmitters. Well, we would if we understood better, but every individual is so different. We would have to have a very specific gauge to identify whether even that impacts us. So not only do you have the neurotransmitter, you got levels, and then you got so on and so forth. But then we have to know it. Does it even make a difference? And that's all about the gauge. But we don't have those.
Yeah.
So we have pain from something, and that pain I will translate as it can be anxiety, it can be depression, it can be, and all of that is actually just data, zeros and ones. So it's like a computer, and that way you can, we articulate, I articulate it as zeros and ones because what happens with zeros and ones is it has to be programmed to understand what does that mean? What is a zero and a one? What does that grouping and programming mean? And that's what the brain is sending to our conscious. So our
Mhm.
conscious is like, wake up, here's the pain, identify yourself, look around, your finger hurts, you burned your finger. That's painful. So now we're going to protect it and we're going to make it better. But when the pain is in the brain, we can't even say pain because it's not, unless it's a migraine or something that literally
Mhm.
is painful as we understand it. We make up a lot of things to say how, and most of it is forensic. And behavior is the forensics behind what's going on in the brain, our interpretation, plus the
Mhm.
biology. Okay, number two, and I'm kind of going around. I'm going to get to what you're saying because you're looking for the practical answer, but I'm trying to give the behind the scenes awareness. It's the difference in speed. The
Mhm.
biology of us, the organ, working to keep us alive is at 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's feedback up and down, up and down, up and down, 1,000,000 miles an hour going back and forth, milliseconds, back and forth, feedback, feedback, sending messages, move your leg, turn, turn left, turn right.
Mhm.
Here comes some environmental issue, danger, danger, fear, whatever. And so it's reacting 1,000,000 miles an hour. Guess how fast our conscious works when we're thinking, processing?
Mhm.
It's horse and buggy. It's 14 bits a second,
Oh,
which is
interesting.
just like, if you ever picked up, you tried to phone through a dial-a-phone in the old days at my age, it took forever. We were all frustrated and it was like, wow, but there wasn't anything to do, but it was frustrating.
Mm.
That's what it is. The brain is working at super speeds of light, not literally, please, but in comparative, relatively. And we are thinking at horse and buggy. So what happens? Brain has all this data. It's dumping into your processing center unorganized.
Mhm.
And that's being filtered, mind you, but at different people are filtering it at different rates, at different things. And then we justify what the heck our body did. We
Mhm.
rationalize. So if we turned left because our body said turn left and your food is on the right. It's over there at the fridge and we went that way. And then we go, oh, yeah, I'm hungry, so I'm going to eat and I'm going to make dinner because it's that time. That's a conscious rationale for what the body is driving you to do.
Mhm.
Now, there's habits, there's all these variables, there's habits, there's learning, and you put all that in there, and it gets to be quite quite the thing. But in the end, what happens? The processing center is finite. So we're shoving a lot of information, but the point of it is a lot of our things that we make around our universe, around ourselves, is to structure so that we don't have to think, motor skills,
Mhm.
but also culture. And emotions is a shortcut. So when we have feelings and emotions, they're actually a shortcut to processing. But that doesn't mean it's accurate, and it doesn't make it right. You can imagine all the domestic or violence and kids violence and all this. That's where it's a shortcut gone wrong for us here. But it could have been right 10,000 years ago. You can imagine the violence 10,000 years ago and how important that was to be, to survive. But we're all crowded into a small little house or place, and all of us are crowded into a little area. Then it isn't working the
Mhm.
same. But genetics doesn't change so fast, right? Unless
Right.
a lot of us are wiped out, and then there's some, does that mean the leftovers are adapted to less violence or more violence? It's a shoot. It's a population versus environment expression, gene expression.
Mhm.
So what's go ahead. I'm just trying to
No,
answer.
perfectly fine. I'm definitely following you. So, are you saying more so that our environmental experiences cause imprints on our psyche, and that is what and our brain slowly starts to compartmentalize that, and that is what comprises our behavior?
Absolutely, but I would probably put it a little bit more stark. I mean, a little more just looking at the processing. Our body is going a million miles an hour. We're processing at a horse and buggy. We
Mhm.
have only our eyes and ears and nose to really give uh, um, fit the picture. So
Right.
we're trying to fit the picture of why we are doing something and how we feel all at the same time. And culture is very structured to give us that shortcut into that's right and wrong. Don't do that because you're going to get punished, or you do this, people look at you good, or you
Mhm.
know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But as a biology, we live on a curve with the population, so culture is only good for the middle part of, it fits for a few people, like a classroom fits for 25% of the students,
Right.
and everybody else is somewhere on both sides of that curve.
Right. So would
And
that be why, say, if you enter a situation that is stressful for you, why people's stressors can be differently? So, for instance, say if you went to people have a problem with public speaking. So say if they one person went to that situation and simply just couldn't speak, got like a knot in their throat. Another person might be sweating and things like that. So that would be the biological effects of the stressors. But both
absolutely.
those individuals would have had a different trigger at the beginning stages of their lives that made that happen.
Yeah, I wouldn't call. I know it triggers an event, but I'm trying to really get focused, keep focused on the awareness of oneself
Mhm.
around and versus other people, so that those are biological differences that impact behavior. You're absolutely right. So we have that internalized where people have the tummy aches or the feelings when they're, and you have the other people who are sweating and may say inappropriate things,
Mhm.
laugh at wrong time or something. And these are all associated with the different symptoms that I was speaking about before in brain divergent. And I just
Mhm.
brought that up because I wanted it to kind of be there as a little tinge of awareness that we are different.
Mhm.
And when they speak about say autism, and then they speak about bipolar as bad and autism as bad. Yes, because they're impacting the function so much that they're impacting the people around them and their ability to take care of themselves.
Mhm.
That's right. But if you look at the more minuscule symptoms, or where they're not so big, all of us are impacted. That's how we operate, is along those lines, but there's a difference. So when you recognize those differences, it's not about, well, it is about interspecies competition, but to understand that is to get away from the racial divide and the
Yes.
stigma and the stereotyping, because now we've brought in biological facts, and we've also said, um, you know, when we're looking at stereotypes and racial, what we're really saying is we're talking about things that really don't understand what the biology is behind,
Mhm.
and it's character flaw. That is such a huge. That's associated what I would say with like stereotyping culture.
Mhm.
Is you say, okay, you did something wrong. Your character is really messed up. I'm going over to you. Your character is really bad. You have a bad. And so you see how that already, what a lack of understanding that is, because it doesn't help. You can't just go, oh, yeah, I'm going to fix my character up
Yeah.
by reading the Bible or something. That's a very inefficient. It works. Everything works, but there's inefficient ways and then there's really efficient ways. That means that instead of 25% or let's say 30% increase of maybe 2 to 3% get better
Mhm.
versus 100% or at least 85 or 90%. That's the difference. And
I do
that's
think
why.
it's, very important to look at the cultural differences. I know that when I would talk to different people and they look at different cultures, they would say, "Well, X culture seems to be more angry than Y culture." I'm like, "No, that's just from your perspective of the way that you were brought up and the way that you were raised. Because to that particular culture, that's just how it is." It's so different, so, I don't wanna say divergent, but it's so different from a cultural perspective, just the way that our upbringings are. But, one of the questions I actually had for you about your program was you say that you all use spiritual counseling in order to help to unify the biology of our origins and behavior. So, how do you utilize spiritual counseling for that?
Thank you for asking, Matt, asking me for that. It's such a short program for me to. I just want to burst out, and I have that feeling too. Just a little tidbit on the culture. Absolutely right. Culture is based on biology. So if your biology is a little bit different, your culture is going to reflect that, not the other way. There is feedback. Okay, always feedback, but really it's coming from the person. So when you say, "Yeah, that's," you have a different perspective, and they have a different perspective, it goes back to that internalization
Mhm,
versus a more of a venting type or reactionary. So let's say we have a more immediate reactionary versus a delayed, but that doesn't make one smarter or better than the other. It's not a character, it's the way our brain is devising and has for thousands of years. And just real quick before I jump into the spiritual,
mhm,
cognitive assessments, I advocate for every child to have one, not because of trying to identify who's smarter or whose IQ is up and whose IQ is down. That is so wrong. It's because we need to know our strengths and weaknesses for the children themselves, not for other adults to classify them. But it's helpful. The children need to understand why they think the way they do.
mhm,
And if when they find that out and they have a good conversation, they are able to have that conversation on, hey, why do I act like this or I think like this? And the
mhm,
person could say, well, it's because of the way your brain is filtering or not filtering, or one side of the part of the brain is really fast and it's creating havoc over on this side of the brain, which is struggling, and you're going to get some ADD, or you're going to feel that you're overwhelmed. And that conversation is so important to children too, so they
mhm.
understand themselves, not each other and each other, that there's differences in this. And that gives the self-esteem and takes away that character issue that, is used to pummel everyone around us for superiority. Okay, back to the spiritual real quick.
Real quick before we jump into that,
Yeah.
because I have a comment on cognitive assessments. So, on cognitive assessments, would you say that's just for children, or can adults do that as well?
Oh no, it's for everyone, but I find children are much faster to grasp and intake the importance of it. They bloom. They enjoy understanding why they are the way they are. Adults struggle because they've already got the habits, the
In their way.
culture, and everything else, and they want to keep their rationale. If they're superior to something, they want to keep it, and they don't want to lose it. So and especially number one, authority. So they feel like, I've come across this in school where we talk with all the kids or everybody's around the table with a problem with
Mhm,
education. And, the parents struggle as much as the teachers do around this concept of identifying cognitive assessment and how it's helpful to understand the yourself and what can you do to make yourself better, stronger, more resilient, and what are your strengths and why do you feel the pain or this and that. They love it, but everyone else struggles with that authority issue of, what does it mean? They can. I'm not saying it's not. It's just harder. That's all.
Yeah. So we were talking about cognitive assessments a second ago, and I really want to dive a little bit more deeply into that before we got into the spiritual aspects of things. And the reason why is because I think it's important for us, even as adults, to do it continuously. For me, I do a self assessment ever so often. I'm not gonna say I do it every night, but ever so often I assess myself to see why did I respond in a particular situation the way that I did and why am I responsive to really anything? And am I okay with that? And if not, what can I do to change that? So, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I have a lot of them. And it really goes back to exactly, self-assessment. And I think make sure to be used it properly. And the proper way is to use it as a enhancement. In other words, oh, look, you know what? I find myself getting a little bit struggling in this way. There's
Mhm.
lots of ways to struggle thinking through. I'm personally a person that needs structure, and I
Mm,
get very disorganized and I get overwhelmed at the end of the day. So I understand that. I know a little bit about all of that stuff, but I didn't know it when I was younger. And boy, did I pay the price that way. It was painful because as soon as puberty and the hormones hit, it was like scrambled eggs.
mhm.
And it didn't make me dumber, but what it did is disorganization. And that I wish I had understood. And so the emotional budgeting program is for that structure. It's internal brain structure. The
Yeah.
cognitive assessment adds to that understanding in the sense that it's very important because it's even though it's scary, I think it's
Mhm.
scary because I know where I'm weak, and I could tell you that I would look terrible on an IQ test, really, as an IQ. But I also know that I have some really things that nobody else has that I've, as far as understanding. So it's a real juxtaposition and understanding those where the struggle is, where the strengths are, and keeping up with it is okay. I'm going to give two well-known examples.
Mhm.
So we both have this scary idea of Biden, we have Trump.
Mhm.
And it's really clear to me, I understand, or I have a whole book coming out about this development, brain development, that touches on this understanding. But for them and me, I'm getting older. And I actually notice a sort of slight, I have some nerve degeneration a little bit. And it does impact getting older does impact slightly how I think or a little bit and I understand that. But it shouldn't be scary. What it is we have developed as we get older, the motor skills and the experience goes into a different part of our long-term memory.
Mm,
And those are actually can be a super strength in the way that it is for, say, Biden. I can't say how Trump is using it, but the issue is that when you are using it for good, you can use those long-term experiences as a power to resolve problems,
mm,
problem solving. However, yeah, there is some immediate nerve sensitivity issues that are probably degrading. That means that you're not reacting to the environment and you're not snappy with your answers, and you might forget but those are compensated by the legit longevity of the experience or the quality of the experience that is used to problem solve.
mhm,
And you really I know as younger, because I'm more the reactive kind of guy
mhm.
person. I also have some of the other things, but what would happen is I would end up in my mind reacting too fast to an issue or to a
Yeah.
thing when I really should have just, I take the time, sit back, give it a day, And I come out always with a better answer. I have
Mm,
never made a good decision angry
got
or, in a moment. It's actually much better a day or two later. And I let
it.
it
Mhm.
and I ruminate and then I calm down and I make a decision is so much better every time. I can't remember a single issue. It does help with spring cleaning. I can tell you that being angry or upset or running around sure gets you going like nothing else. But it's the high blood pressure, right?
Yeah.
So it's the biology of the stuff, but it's
Mhm,
not for making good decisions. And this is where we can see being older is okay.
mhm.
It's okay. We don't have to be all called senile or, this or that. Alzheimer is a particular problem because it's awareness. If
Yeah.
you're not aware of your surroundings, that's a problem in my book, because now you're really impacting your ability to be aware. And that's an issue.
Yeah.
But as far
Mhm.
as thinking and resolving and resolving problems or problem solving, having that long term experience is incredibly important. So when we see like grandpa and little and your child or grandson, that's an important pairing because we have, yeah, grandpa's not running around and taking the kid out to basketball and running there and going swimming, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. But they're sharing a narrative of experience, problem solving skills with someone who is just reacting, to day to day things. And that sharing and that communication in every society,
Mm,
to me, is very important. And it kind of where I see when the family's disrupted, it impacts that kind of problem solving. And problem solving is the basis. And that's why with emotional budgeting program that we're doing is so, in my mind, important to make that foundation because it does all those things for biology, but it also does all the things for society. We sit back and we go, oh, yeah, you know what? I can be calmer about this because the recall is not coming in like a PTSD moment. It's
yeah.
coming in as a fact associated with a choice and a decision. And I know I have to be responsible because I'm aware.
Mhm. So when we talk about neurodegradation and neuroplasticity as one ages, are there ways to increase your neuroplasticity? And also, how do you switch from short-term memory to long-term memory? So how do you take something from short-term to long-term?
Well, I think, that's not really, I think science hasn't really, they say a lot of things. And I think again, it's so easy for people to go into character, right? From
Mm,
short to long. If your short-term memory is an issue, I have working uh, memory issues because my filters are not as good as I wish they were. In other words, I'm distracted easily by noise or sounds of distress. I'm
mm,
much more like I have to go over there and take care of that situation right now.
yeah.
Other people can ignore it. They sit around and look on the computer, all day or do their work and completely ignore everything else going around them until they
Mhm,
have to. They get up and go do it. I have that. And so it's a real battle for me to keep organized in the short term. Long
mm,
term, I have great long term memory. But knowing that doesn't always, it's not easy to go, okay, here. So the my tricks are create space, take care of all the little things that are going to distract you, you know, uh, tidy up, clean up, make sure the dogs are, the kids are, fed and everything's going, the schedule's done. I have to do all that before I can sit down. And it's cost me. I've delayed my books years because I have to, I feel responsible to take those care of things around me first
mhm,
before I go back to writing. And that's not the case with people. Some people are much less sensitive to those distractions and they'll write their book first and they'll become famous and they have make money and they do all that. But if
mhm,
you're a person who's taking care of your family first or you're distracted by the pain of others, you put off these things. And so we do have lopsided issues or disparities between groups of people because one group is really paying attention to what's around them and distracted. The other group is, I don't care. You poor, you're hurt. I'm going to write my book,
yeah,
and off they go writing their book and they make money. It's same with financial or whatever. I'm exaggerating
mm,
because I'm just trying to draw this kind of, I'm trying to draw the separation of what I'm talking
right.
about. And
I think that's very important though, because I think a lot of times people get stuck in their head about I'm supposed to be, I'm supposed to be able to sit down and work constantly, but I have other things in my life to take care of, and then we do start to judge ourselves when we compare ourselves to others. You
oh,
know,
absolutely a big problem.
how was, Sue Ann, I don't know why the name came up, but how was Sue able to go over and, she got all her things accomplished, and here we are, got started at the same time, and I haven't done that. But at the same time, there are other accomplishments that you did that Sue might not have done. So it's really just a matter of perspective.
And money, because you're
And
probably helping other people and you're getting their things done for them, or you're working to make sure the community around you is good, and you haven't done a darn thing for yourself to make money. That's what I'm trying to get at. And we characterize that as an issue. And in fact, instead of saying, hey, you know what, you're a hero, because instead of going around and getting, sitting down and ignoring everybody else around you in your community, you've actually reached out to them, and you should be the hero in that moment for that. So there's different strengths. Everyone kind of has a place. It's okay. But what I really dislike is the characterization of someone who's trying hard, working for the community, has done nothing for themselves, money wise, or, to make themselves like a here, some kind of big shot, and all of a sudden, they act like, oh yeah, see, you're nothing, you didn't do anything, and in fact you did everything. And I really resent that sort of characterization. That's why, going back to the biology of it, and I've just spoken about this,
mhm,
the heroes are is everybody, if they are aware that everybody has a place.
yeah,
Everybody can contribute, and I mean literally just about everybody
mhm,
contributes in one way or another. It's just we have to, if we're aware and we are smart enough, we will make sure these people are involved and engaged and are equal to, if we say, oh, you're a violin player at 5 and you composed at 8 and then you went on to be 5 diplomas and
yeah,
graduated at 16, we act as if that's some kind of great thing. It's
mhm,
not. Those people haven't solved a problem around them. Not
mhm,
one, most likely. They're so structured into their music because not only is it the outside telling them, but their capability is structuring their focus into it. But they haven't done a thing for the community. Did they go help grandma go shopping? Did they help the kids? If there's 5 kids and you're trying to help take care of them, have you done that? The list goes on and on. Those are heroes too.
mhm,
And we neglect that by thinking, oh, this person is so capable, when really, problem solving. We all problem solve. And the better we are at it, the
mhm,
greater our function as a society and taking care of others will be, and the more we share. So, despite our differences, and there are differences, and that's what
mhm,
we should be aware of, not bad or good. We need to get out of that. And this cognitive assessment is not about IQ.
right,
What a mistake. Because that, just like I mentioned, you could be the smartest person in that block, but if you're not doing anything problem solving for
mhm,
anybody other than, playing music, what are we doing? We have to problem solve
mhm,
for ourselves and for others. Just to be the best violinist in the city or the block is great, and kudos and support. But that doesn't mean the person down the street is nothing, just
mhm.
because they're helping grandma or their family. What are we trying to say? And it's not good in
Yeah,
my
it's
mind.
funny because I feel like we brought up IQ a few times, and for me, I think I took an IQ test many years ago back in high school, like a serious one. But as I've grown and gotten older, I find how much the IQ test kinda puts you into a box, and it allows people to label you as either intelligent or non-intelligent. And I'm like, well, there are so many different ways to be intelligent. There's so many different ways to be a functioning member of society, and so many ways to help people. I personally think that the musician is helping people through their music you know? And I think that the person who's helping grandma is, paying back to the community as well. I don't think that like I said, I don't think that, any one is better than the other.
Absolutely,
And
I agreed.
yeah, and they could definitely I mean, the person that's helping the grandma from an IQ perspective, could have a significantly higher IQ than the person who just completed their 4th symphony, you know? But
Absolutely.
how are we comparing these? I feel like that's comparing,
Exactly.
apples to oranges.
Exactly. And it just doesn't make any sense in why we compare people just because they're not doing something that is for a few people, or are they doing something that's really for a community? I mean, it, it it's just not on the same idea. But people like to do that. Yeah, absolutely.
Hate to put others in boxes, but
Yeah.
now that we've gotten so far so far away from where we were trying to go. But yeah, let's talk about spiritual counseling and how you use it to unify biology and our origins and behavior.
Okay. So a little disclaimer here. My wife is really she has a lot of theology and has been certified and gone through a lot, but she's also a PhD in psychology.
Mm,
And I am starting late as far as the structured end of it. I've always been sort of a Christian person. I believe in Christian ethos and beliefs. However, a lot of it didn't fit the picture for a long time for me.
mhm,
And for behavior, biology had to be straightened out in my mind. Uh, what was biology behind, what was behavior? So really, I had nothing. I was a tabula rasa. I mean, I had no idea about mental health when I was younger. I just assumed it was culture. I assumed it was just, influence of where you were in the world because I had traveled a lot. But boy, what a change when we are dealing with disabilities or mental health issues. They bring out the things that are on the side, like that population curve I was mentioning, or the biology curve, where the issues, the disabilities are on the edge. So everyone can they're working in the middle. They're able to be functional to institutional expectations. Okay, that's a
mhm,
word I really like, but it's institutional expectations. That means we have cultural expectations, but we have institutional expectations. And when they fall outside of that, then we're looking at labels like bipolar and autism and all
right,
kinds of other things. And we're just speaking not in the not really medical terms right now, just this sort of idea. And so one of the things that's really made me more aware, aside from the divergence in how the brain develops, is the biology, as I mentioned, the speed, um, the difference in brain thinking, and what that all means to behavior. Once I had that, I felt comfortable in saying, okay, what can we do to make this fit? Because we, as in America, I'm just going to stick with what I know really
mhm,
here, have tried to evolve from scope trials, which was 1932. I didn't look it up yet, but it was the scopes trial was where the state was trying to still say that evolution, didn't happen, or it was the monkey trials, and we're still kind of fighting, in my opinion, around the idea of what the Bible and its history implies versus, biology and evolution and what science applies. What science applies to that, and in that, it's very important for me to fit the picture. And what I've started doing is looking at quantum theory
mhm,
and the emotional budgeting, which is the functional aspect, and putting it together to understand and be able to teach or to have give this conversation about making the right choice. And in making the right choice is very similar to quantum theory in the sense that, and both in the sense of biology and in quantum theory and in the biblical sense, because we have said it's God's will. It's not, the future isn't written, all
mhm,
the way over to there's nothing, it's just science. And in there, I see a perfect kind of fit as far as the picture for me. And I
mhm,
think it's applicable to make a unified theory or unified knowledge or unified faith in connecting all of that. So we can say, yes, there is a God. If you have faith in it, it's not a problem to believe that. It's not a problem to believe in evolution and biology.
Mhm.
It fits. And here's why it fits. And that's where we're going to go with this. In that process, there is a very good applicable quantum theory articulation of making a choice. In my opinion, there are there's a couple of people who've come out recently. I don't have his name quite; it's on the tip of my tongue, but who said, "Oh, we don't have free will," or and there's people who say, "Well, we have lots of it," and that's agency. So I call it agency and free agency. In that, I also believe, in a way, there are too many variables of which we are born into to have a complete free will. But what I do believe in is adding that spiritual component, which says you have a determination and a choice, which is you can either love or hate in any given situation. Now, that's dramatic because we all know it can be
Mhm.
grayer than that. You don't have to love and you don't have to hate. But those are dramatic points of decisions that no matter, like the Christians, they were tortured. They were
Mhm.
completely tortured, thrown into the lions. That was the whole idea behind Christianity is in the moment of torture,
Mhm.
pain, complete pain, you forgive the person who's torturing you. That's love. So they took a path of love. It didn't change their outcome. It was that. But if we start with that outcome, and we could hurry this up a little, but if we start with that outcome, this is the result. We can choose in quantum theory, it's either or until it's measured,
Mhm.
whatever that is. And I've said, okay, that's a decision. It's either or until you've made a determination. So if you open that quantum box, which is a Schrodinger's cat kind of thing, where it's a
Mhm.
scattered, and then you have that uh, everything is both until it's opened and you measure it. And that measurement to me is a determination. So you go, okay, I make a decision. I'm going to choose to love in that moment. I'm going to choose to feel, to do the good thing in this moment. And if you bring that further back, that choice sets up a whole path of variables that is completely different than if you say, I'm going to seek revenge. I hate him. I'm
Mhm.
angry. I'm going to do everything I can. I hate her. I feel bad. I hate that, this whole route. Now,
Yeah.
I can promise you that when you're working with kids with mental health issues, it's very clear. You can see the difference in pathways.
Yeah.
When it's not so clear and we're all kind of making fuzzy choices between whether we like or the pathway kind of variability doesn't really change a whole lot, but you see it in very clear moments. And if we can say it early enough in our childhood, I believe that it changes more the pathway. Now, it doesn't mean it's a pathway to riches. It doesn't mean it's a
Mhm.
pathway to all the right things in your life to make you happy. And that's where the spiritual comes in because there's a little bit of faith. It goes,
Right.
if you're an atheist and you say, it doesn't matter, I'll just choose whatever I want. Or I say, okay, I'm going to take everything I can with me. And I'm going to do whatever I want to. Or you say, okay, you know what? I have a faith and I believe that if I choose this pathway and I put love or like, or, I'm
Mhm.
trying to do the right thing, but I can't determine every moment. I can't say when I'm going to be the best person. I can't say, I'm not going to do that because it's almost impossible, but I'm going to put it in my conscious box. I'm going to say, that's what I'm going to choose right now. That opens up a whole universe. And in quantum theory, you've opened up that determinant and it's made a whole bunch of decisions through that trajectory. I
Mhm.
don't know if you've ever watched the movie Darko, and it kind of gives that. It's a very kind of dark movie, but for him, it's always
Darko, like Donnie Darko?
yeah, Donnie
Oh,
Darko.
yeah, it's great.
He has that pathway, that sort
Yeah.
of water funnel, and it goes to different pathways. Every time he tries to do something, it goes through different pathways. And his didn't change, but what he found was when he did the right thing, it impacted the other people
Mhm.
positively. So he
Yeah.
saves some lives and he does this and that when he chooses the right thing. Instead of trying to save himself all the time,
Mhm.
he sees that his good works saves other people.
Yeah.
That's kind of a Christian ethos. And that's where I feel the spiritual counseling makes sense. When we bring the quantum theory to the Bible, or to Jesus more specifically,
Mhm.
I have reservation. You can bring it to the Bible, but I have more of a historical context around that. But Jesus, to me, speaks to his the irony, turn the other cheek in a moment of
Yeah.
violence, or and wow, what a concept, because our biology wants to just roar like a lion and put up,
Mhm.
and that's so contrary. It's 180 degrees.
Mhm.
But all of it is specific to human carrying capacity. Carrying capacity is usually applied to animals, but carrying capacity, I believe, is very important to us now, especially with all the threats of, say, nuclear threats, or fighting and going on with all our weapons. Carrying capacity is directly, to our ability to sustain a growing population, or
Yeah.
growing needs of our population. And not only that, sustain it, but make it so it's not so painful, or at least enjoyable for most of
Mhm.
us. That, to me, is how Christian counseling and bringing a unified understanding of, say, quantum theory into the biology, and the biology into Christian, it's all fits. It just takes a while to articulate all these different points in it, and I'm so sorry we are limited in time.
No, it's perfectly fine. I actually really love the way that you interwove, quantum theory with spirituality. I think you did it very beautifully, and I love how a lot of spiritual individuals are diving more into quantum physics and theory, because when you look at things, first thing that came to mind for me was wave particle duality, and when you brought up the Schrodinger's cat, I was just like, "Well, yeah, you're exactly right. Until we actually make a decision, until we look under that box to see, or look into the box and see the cat, till we make the decision, it can go either way." And when you look at it from a Christian perspective, it is all about, are you going to respond to this in anger, or are you going to respond to it with love? And while, yes, those are 2 polarizing, ideas, and agreed, it's not that black and white, it is very gray. It's all about your decisions, and your decisions is what lays out the framework for what's gonna be happening for the rest of your life or down the line. And as you continue to make what we would consider quote unquote "positive decisions" or quote unquote "loving decisions," you do start to find that things work out a little bit better in your favor. But that goes back to faith, because you have to have the faith that by doing their quote unquote "right thing," it's gonna work out in your favor. But I just love the way that you brought all that together.
Yeah, I would just add, I think sometimes the reward too is delayed gratification, and
Oh,
that's
for
a
sure.
maturity. But also, we're looking at the reward in the end, everlasting life, or and that's easy to me to explain through quantum theory. So science, to me, is a very important part of spiritual connecting, because what we really don't want, or what happens, in my opinion, what I see in society or in individuals, is someone trying to explain their belief in Christianity through the Bible's
Right.
literal sense, and then going, well, if I believe that, I have to reject everything over on this side,
Mhm.
evolution. And we got the Scopes trial. I have to reject that. And you don't. You don't have to reject it. We can explain it. And here is the hard facts behind that explanation. In the same way that emotional budgeting, we have facts. It's not like we're making, just because you have a feeling, that's great. I have a feeling. But now let's look at the facts behind it.
Mhm.
You didn't get that feeling because you looked at a wall. You got that feeling from a relationship. What happened in a relationship, or your
Mhm.
surroundings of other people. So when we know the facts, not the emotions, that comes from knowing the facts. When we know the facts behind the relationship,
Mhm.
you're aware, because when we feel something, it doesn't come out with a set of facts. It comes out with a set of assumptions.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, cultural assumptions. What did I see? What did I hear? Is it true? Am I paranoid?
Yeah.
Is that why I feel? And why does it mean that we have to validate a feeling? If you're mad and you're going to go out and kill someone, that feeling should not be validated.
Right.
I mean, it's those things, like that kind of cliche and stereotype how we discuss emotions and feelings as if they're wonderful. No, they're built on facts. When you know the facts, they could be wonderful,
Mhm.
they could be a problem, it could be a lot of things. But if you understand the facts, you're aware, and now you can make a decision,
Right.
and you can make a choice. So if they're bad, you can find out why they're bad, what the facts are behind them. And then you can think, okay, what resource do I have to help me get out or change the facts so I don't have to deal with the consequence of that emotion? In other words, change the environment, but you need the resource. You need to understand why. So when you go to a counselor, you can articulate
Yeah.
those facts, not just say, I have this feeling that I really love this person. Is that right? Or is that wrong?
Mhm.
And a person could be a violent sex offender. I mean, it could be the worst person in the world, but they could say, I really love this guy. Wait a minute, let's go back and look at the facts.
Yeah.
Just because you have that feeling doesn't make it a good situation. But if we look at the facts and you make a decision to stay with this person,
Mhm.
now you have the responsibility. But if you don't look at the facts, you can always get away with, well, I just had that feeling.
Mhm.
Well, that feeling was, there were facts behind the feeling. And if you didn't go for the facts, that feeling isn't going to cut it for responsibility in my eyes. It just means it hurt you, they hurt you, you did it again, you went from one boyfriend to another bad boyfriend, but you went with it because it was a good feeling, then it was a bad feeling, but no facts, no way to talk or show someone what happened in the background that led to that response and action and consequence.
Mhm.
Because once you have that on paper, it goes into your mind as a file. And you know what? That brain is going to do for you what that person may have failed to do. The
Mhm.
brain is going to know that it was not good. It's going to have that file. And when it puts it back in a good order, back into the memory processing, the actual body is going like, you know what? We're going to be self-preservation here. I think this is not a good idea because I have a set of files that shows exactly what the events were,
Mhm.
not just the feeling, but the files of what happened. And in those consequences, then that stirs up all the biology. In other words, the
Yeah.
fear, the anxiety that you don't want to get yourself into again, so that the consequences, you're avoiding the bad consequences. And for the good things, you do want to know the facts behind the good things so you can repeat them and know what drives good consequences. So you're not guessing, oh, this group or that situation or this situation. The facts are what makes the emotion. But the brain isn't dumping into the processing center the facts. It's just dumping the
Mhm.
feeling. So now, unless you go backtrack and do some forensic work, you're guessing. The person is guessing. The individual is guessing.
Yeah. Well, that goes all the way back to where we were talking about cognitive assessment and cognitive awareness. You
Ex-
know, being
yes,
able
yes,
to assess where the biological functions and the emotions, where all of that comes from, and then being aware of all of that and using the awareness from the assessment to make the decision on whether or not you should or shouldn't move forward with your decision.
exactly. And again, the cognitive assessment is not meant, in my mind, the children, the students are so quick to understand because they immediately soak up the idea of the picture, how the picture fits for them.
Mhm.
They knew they had issues or they felt they had issues. They just couldn't articulate or understand where it was coming from. And then as soon as you say, hey, this is how your brain thinks, it's so intuitive. It's amazing. It's never failed. Assuming that the kids are, there's not too, too much disability or too severe. Always they respond with a relief, like, wow, okay, I don't have to think like I'm paranoid or stressed, or
Mhm.
what a relief they feel for. It doesn't make the problem go away. It just means that now they can do a better understanding and search and work to strengthen up what they feel is been issues. And there's lots of that actually on the internet. Is once you've identified kind of where the person feels that they're struggling a little bit, one thing or another.
So I just had what I was gonna ask, and it just left my mind. So, when we talk about children, I don't know what I was about to say. So, when we say kids and we talk about when kids have these assessments, around what age are we talking? Because there's the old, I would say, mythos that, "Show me the child at 7, I'll show you the man." So, around what age should we start doing these assessments of children?
Oh, that they have lots. You can do it as early as 3 if you really want to, and they do when there's a neonatal or an issue out of an infant, and they see some developmental issues. It
Yeah,
doesn't happen a lot, but it is. Um, if the doctor sees some developmental delays or some issues, and they think there might be an issue, the school you have to go into a big rigmarole to get the school to identify that child as needing an assessment. Otherwise, it's private, and private is pretty expensive.
yeah.
But it can be anywhere from 3. I think the youngest. I'm trying. I never did really young because I was mostly in middle school and high school. But there
Mhm.
was the roving psychologist who would do like pre kindergarten. To get into kindergarten or to get into first grade, and there. I don't remember exact issues, but it wasn't a lot, but there was one or two or three. However, I would say the most useful, and here's just off the tip of my thinking. I haven't done any recent research, and I don't remember exactly, but they say there isn't a change between giving, say, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old a cognitive assessment until they're in their late 50s when there might be a decline.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So when they do a cognitive assessment, it's always based on age. So
Mhm.
it changes the whole population curve who's taking the assessment.
Yeah.
So you're actually graded not actually so much by your some universal idea. You're graded within the population that you take it, which actually is the difference between what I was mentioning, the two difference between how our brains work. So there is actually a group. I would be definitely impacted differently when I take it versus someone who is more on the uh, that side that is more academic, but maybe less
Mhm.
sensitive or reactionary. The
Yeah.
way their brains work is different, and so they generally tend to have a higher score, but that doesn't mean they have less problems, which
Mhm.
is, this is why I just get, it drives me a little bit to distraction because people misinterpret a lot of that. Now, it's useful to me when I look at it because I can see the difference. The biggest issues, you can have smart kid, but there's an issue because part of their brain is slower. So you have
Mhm.
150, but if that part of the brain is 75, which is a score and a difference medium, it creates havoc for that child. Just complete pain, anxiety. I mean, it's just a meltdown, behavior wise, every which way you can think of. So it's really the difference in how the different parts of the brain speed is working that creates this kind of additional behavioral issues. So that's really important to understand. Um, and also the fact that everything is done in a curve. So all the 7-year-olds are measured against 7 and 9-year-olds. They're not measured against adults, and so on and so on. So you get, and there are different tests, age group difference, who take different tests. You're expected to know more when you get older, basically. So
Yeah.
if you don't have schooling, some parts of that test might be actually a complete flop because they're based on this idea that you've had some intuitive schooling. If you've had, practice with some things, it would increase the abilities, maybe depending on the person. So there's a lot in there that I believe is not really looked at from a education point of view, from an institutional expectation point of view. Now, from the people who wrote those tests, they actually have a thick book that explains a lot of this, but it's really for people with PhDs and people who are doing the education scoring are just doing a line. Does the child pass this line or didn't they? Because if he did, he gets into the school with special ed. If he doesn't, he can't get in.
Mm.
So it's not a real interpretation of their brain. It's more of a, did he pass? Did he not? get into it? Did he reach a level? Is it below or above? And that to me is not, the best way to understand a child, is just to know if he went in or didn't get into a program. And that's where it's not going to happen, but I wish it would happen, that every child had access to a cognitive assessment with someone who understood that it's not an IQ, but that
Okay.
every child deserves support, whatever side of the curve they're on, over smart, under, more challenges, doesn't matter.
Mm,
Every child should have the understanding of where they're at. And this can be accomplished. I'm just going to throw this in there. We have AI, we have software, we have robotics, we have math, things where a child can go through the math problems themselves because they can go through at their own pace. And they
mm,
can do it over and over and over and over and repetitive till it gets a motor skill. And to me, that's how a lot of these classes should be done. Not every class, but the ones that are repetitive and have the same, everyone shares the same stuff. And you can do it. You can just keep doing it till you pass. And to me, and then when you have a score, the teacher can actually see the score that they're getting. And from the cognitive assessment, they would know exactly why the child is struggling.
mm,
Instead of the teacher frustrated in front of the class with only 25% of the kids who really are paying attention,
yeah.
because everyone else is either too slow or too fast, or it's just not paying attention enough.
Mm,
I think personally, this is the best way to use a teacher's time, is to have that additional information to address the child's to go at their pace, but to understand why the child might be having some issues, instead of dismissing with grades, oh, you got an F, you don't understand, or your behavior was such. I've seen, and it's not really fair, because you see kids who have autistic or ADD issues and they're in there eating snacks. And then you have kids who are really struggling because they just have this processing, or maybe there's some other issues, and they're just dismissed. And
mm,
yet they have an undefined, nobody knows what, but nobody cares because it's undefined issue. And so it's a character. The
yeah.
child does not have the character to be there. It's because his family or whatever, instead of really having the knowledge and the application. And then the teacher has the time, because they're not trying to discipline everyone into the 25% populate, the curve, the biology curve of the moment. Instead of trying to do all that, the computer is doing it for them, but they can get the information so they can help those around the kids at the time that those children need it, to support them, because they have the understanding that there's a struggle
Mm,
in that moment. And the kids are busy because they're looking at the computer and they're repeating and repeating, and there's nothing wrong with, um, learning by doing over and over again. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it's not the end all. But if that's what you're basing your grade on, then let's make it even for everybody.
mm,
Why are we only serving 25% of our population and then going, well, you're too smart, you're just going to go to jail, or you're not smart enough and we don't want you, you just go do whatever in vocational, or if you're good luck.
mm,
I've seen that in schools actually, and I'm sorry to say I've actually seen that attitude, and it's not with everyone, but it exists. And I think that it's time for a change. I think all our children are valued. It's ironic because I see, for me, I see this real push for, like, I'm going to really wing out there a little bit. People, hang on with me. It's great. We value life. We value babies, and there's a real strong anti-abortion ticket, and everyone's involved. But that should translate for the child to grow up that way. Every child. It shouldn't just
mm,
stop with the birth and then, you know, now just, good luck. It's environmental competitiveness. Whoever wins, great. And that goes, that to me defeats the purpose,
yeah.
because otherwise you're saying it's genetic, may the best gene win, or you're saying, hey, we value every life. And if we do so, let's do it through their growing up in age, and then we work with every child to make sure they succeed in however they can. But to do that, you need the knowledge. You need that to do it with sorry. You need to do that with the assessment to know what is happening. Otherwise, we also make assumptions. And
Mhm.
that's where we all go wrong with institutional expectations, uh, is making those assumptions rather than basing it on knowledge. So that to me is the bottom line. It's not the policy. It's can we make sure, and we can. I don't actually. Money just seems the least of our problems at this moment. We have the tools, we have the knowledge. It's just can everyone get together and just make it happen? That's all I see.
I agree. I think that it'd be great to follow a child's development, not just from an intellectual perspective, but behaviorally as well. But Dr. Paul, that's pretty much all the time that we have today. Is there something that you want to leave with the audience before we go?
No, I've scattered, I've gone off the rails here with all kinds of things, and I really want to make sure that really the bottom line here is awareness and a unifying idea that it everything from my picture until I get to show and showcase it or discuss it properly and connect the dots, it's all connected and it all fits the picture. It's okay, and I think we need to be comforted by that. That's what
Yeah,
I'm looking for. All of it is to comfort people, to say, hey, it's okay. It's all right. We can relax. It all fits. You believe in God. You believe in, it all fits together. It's okay. And we can make ourselves better. We can help others. And we can be aspiring, competitive individuals. Nobody has to be left out of their drive. But let's understand why.
right.
Let's get that awareness in and be comforted.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I truly, this is great. I love behavioral therapy and behavioral psychology. My fiance is actually a childhood behavioral therapist, so this is going to be great to just review together. And I want to thank everybody for coming on and watching this episode of Onion Soup. Have a great one. Bye.
Thank you so much for letting me be here.
So, thanks.